A correctional officer clocks in, works a shift, and takes home a paycheck, the same as a warehouse worker or a delivery driver. On paper, the transaction looks ordinary. An employer buys hours, and a worker sells them. The difference sits in where those hours are spent. Correctional officers spend their working lives inside jails and prisons, surrounded by people who are held there against their will. Every dollar they earn is earned inside a locked facility that runs on rules, searches, and constant supervision. To understand the economics of this job, you have to stop looking at the hourly rate by itself and start looking at what the employer is actually buying. The employer is buying order inside a place built to confine people. That changes the price. Economists describe a wage as a price. A worker sells labor and an employer pays for it. The price of labor depends on more than the hours involved. It depends on the skill required, on how unpleasant the work is, on how much responsibility it carries, and on what could go wrong while doing it. Two jobs can demand the same number of hours and pay very different amounts, and the difference usually traces back to conditions. Correctional work is one of the clearest examples of this principle in the labor market. The core product an officer sells is custodial control. Custodial means having care and guardianship over someone. In a jail or prison, custodial control means keeping people who are confined there safe, supervised, and inside the rules every hour of every shift. That is the product, and the paycheck is the price of that product. Check this out. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, the federal agency that documents American jobs, lists the duties of a correctional officer plainly. Officers enforce rules and keep order within jails or prisons, and they supervise the activities of people in custody. Inspections are part of the job too, so officers check that the facility meets security and safety standards. Searches are conducted inside the facility, including searches of persons and property, looking for rule violations. Conduct reports are another duty, meaning written records of how people in custody behave. Officers also escort and transport people in custody between jail, courtroom, prison, or another point. Every duty on that list involves exercising authority over people who are being held somewhere against their will. Searching another adult's body and belongings is a routine, written down part of this job description. That's crazy. Most jobs ask a worker to handle materials, information, or customers. This job asks a worker to handle confinement itself. The list also shows what the employer worries about. Inspections, searches, and conduct reports all exist to catch problems before they grow. The officer is paid to find trouble early, every day, on purpose. The setting is what separates this paycheck from an ordinary one. Officers work in a coercive environment. Coercive means people are made to do things through force or the threat of force. Everyone incarcerated in a jail or prison is there under legal compulsion. They are confined. They follow schedules they did not choose in a space they cannot leave. The officer stands at the center of that arrangement. The rules of the institution only hold if someone enforces them face to face, and the officer is that someone. This requires a consistent exercise of institutional authority. Institutional authority means the officer's power comes from the facility and the law behind it. The power has to be applied evenly, shift after shift, to keep the whole system stable. An officer who enforces rules inconsistently teaches everyone inside that the rules are negotiable, and a facility where rules are negotiable becomes unsafe for every person in it. So the employer is paying for reliability under pressure. The wage buys a person who will apply the same standard on their best day and on their worst day. Now put a price on attention. In most jobs, attention rises and falls with the workload. A slow afternoon at an office is a break. Inside a correctional facility, supervision is the workload. Watching, counting, inspecting, and reporting continue whether the day is calm or tense. A calm shift still requires the same vigilance as a hard one. The officer's job is to keep the calm from breaking. That is a real economic cost. Sustained attention is exhausting, and workers who must supply it for an entire shift are supplying something scarcer than simple time. Think about what the duty list demands. Inspecting a facility for security and safety standards means checking things that are almost always fine, thousands of times, so that the one time something is wrong, it gets caught. The officer gets paid the same whether anything happens or nothing happens, and the employer wants nothing to happen. The paycheck is buying prevention. Prevention is invisible when it works, and that is exactly why institutions have to pay for it deliberately. A large part of this wage compensates a person for events that never occurred. That's crazy, right? The best shift an officer can have is one where nothing happens at all. Then there is the risk. Every duty on the official list carries a possibility of conflict. Enforcing a rule on a person who is confined against their will can produce resistance. Conducting a search can produce a confrontation. Reporting on someone's conduct can produce resentment that lasts for months in a building where the officer and that person will see each other again tomorrow. Escorting and transporting people in custody means moving them through doors and vehicles, moments when control is hardest to maintain. Labor markets respond to conditions like these with what economists call a compensating differential. That is the extra pay a job must offer to attract workers when the work is stressful, hazardous, or unpleasant. If two jobs paid identically and one of them involved daily rule enforcement inside a locked facility, most workers would take the other job. So the correctional wage has to carry a premium above comparable ordinary labor or the positions go unfilled. That premium is priced into the paycheck and reflects the environment, the stress, and the possibility that any routine duty can turn dangerous. Add it all up and the paycheck has to cover 4 things at once. Stress comes first, since the officer manages tension for the length of every shift. Confinement comes second, since the officer works inside the same locked walls as the people in custody, hour after hour. Authority is a third component, since the officer must exercise real power over other adults, correctly and evenly, with consequences for getting it wrong. Hazard is the last, since rule enforcement in a coercive setting can always escalate. The institution needs all 4 supplied together by the same person, reliably, every single day. Jails and prisons hold people at all hours, so order inside them cannot be paused or postponed. That is a demanding purchase, and demanding purchases cost money. When pay fails to match the burden, the people willing to carry the burden become harder to find. The wage, whatever it is in a given state or facility, is the market's price for keeping order inside a building that confines people. So the economics of this job come down to a single trade. The officer sells order, vigilance, and the willingness to hold authority inside a coercive environment. The institution buys a guarantee that its rules will be enforced and its people supervised on every shift without exception. The paycheck is the price of that guarantee. On its own, the hourly rate is an incomplete measure. Weighed against the conditions, the constraints, and the risks, the number becomes a measure of what society is willing to pay for order behind locked doors. That lesson applies far beyond prisons. Every wage in the economy is a price for a bundle of conditions, responsibilities, and risks, and the correctional officer's paycheck makes that truth easier to see than almost any other job in America. If this changed how you look at a paycheck, subscribe for more on how money really works.